if you watch the entire, Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our program. Shall we do this?
We Ladies and gentlemen, just before we begin our forum, we would like to hear from Deborah Mercer and Andrea Thompson, remarks from the student government. Please welcome them. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Deborah Mercer, and I'm treasurer for student government. On my left, I'm responsible for secretary. First of all, let me welcome you in order to commemorate this special day, Black Solidarity Day. And of course, you know that through student government, a lot of hard work was done, and we should commend them. So I'm asking all student government officers who are here today to stand up, please. Of course, we received assistance from club members, officers, and also student services. Special recognition goes to Dr. Reyes. Could you stand up, please, Dr. Reyes? And all the other divisions which contributed to such a successful day. Thank you very much.
To the student government, what we call our forum for night, the main event, will begin. I'd like to introduce you to my colleague, Professor Don Kelly, who is a professor of social science at Medgar College. He's been here since 1973, and he's been doing an outstanding job. Dr. Kelly will come forward and
Hello, all you wonderful people. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize Dr. Betty Shabazz. Would you stand, please? I'll ask our members of the panel to come forward at this point, and I'll introduce them all at the same time, and then just have them speaking. While they do that, you know, maybe some 20-odd years ago, a psychiatrist from Martinique, who ended up living in Algeria, France, Fanon, raised an issue that still is being answered today. The question he raised was, what does it mean to be black when the person who invented the digger is disappearing and losing control all over the world? That's a telling question, and it's a very real question today. Whether we're talking about New York City, or Panama, or Zimbabwe, or England, or any other place where you find people who are called black, who are called African, who are called people of color. In a very particular way here last week, I have a student who's in one of my classes who is registered full-time at Fordham. And he came to Medgar because he wanted to learn something about black people. And he ended up in the course I teach in world civilization. He came to my office one day after class and said, "What would you do if someone came up to you in a class and called you a nigger?" Of course, I said, I'd knock on his ass. So some things you don't discuss. But he was quite serious because this had happened to him at Fordham. Then the teacher came in and proceeded to tell him about the wonders of Europeans, and he felt like a nigger. So that led him to take the course seriously, see if he could learn something that would tool him up, to enable him to deal with the racism that we are indeed confronted with in New York City. The topic of our panel for tonight. We have an election that raises clearly an issue, even if it's a non-issue. We have a history of racist violence that would seem to be on the increase, but you always have to be careful when you say things on the increase as opposed to just recognize that things are being reported. And then at the same time, we live in an environment where we have to be clear that black, for us, is a cultural history, a cultural unity. That means the Caribbean, that means the Americas, that means the United States, that means Europe, that means Asia, that means all those people who have some identity with the collective wisdom and the collective civilizations of the continent of Africa. On a very real level, we have to be confronted with the notion of black as a color and not as a heritage. See, black as a color is when you can't get a job. See, black as a color is when they tell you you only vote for Dinkins because he's black. See, that's black as a color. It's a means of masquerading a form of discrimination, a form of ascendancy for some people who don't call themselves black. And it's only a color, it's a term, it's an insult, it's everything that we don't want to be but are. Tonight, the people who we have speaking to you have resolved that contradiction for themselves a long time ago. Our first speaker will be Professor Herb Phoenix, who is Deputy Chair in Special Programs. He coordinates counseling. He's directing the new pre-freshman program. He's a father and a grandfather. He's a member of quite a few organizations, including Black Social Workers. And he serves in a lot of citywide, statewide organizations. Our next speaker, I feel embarrassed to introduce him, is Attorney Alton Maddox. I feel embarrassed to introduce him because if I have to introduce him, I'd be wondering why you would be here. The thing about his background that may not be known, of course he's a lawyer, but what people don't know is that both at Howard and then at Boston College, where he did his educational work, he focused on business. But the demands of black people meant that he couldn't just stay focused in business. To quote and attribute to him, he has shunned the black bourgeoisie and had joined the ranks of the African masses with the post-market. We also have once boy wonder Al Sharpton, Reverend Al Sharpton. ABCs where he was preaching at the age of 4. Forming national youth organizations by the age of 16. and of course, in the last few years, part of the leadership of this city. Our final speaker is Professor Zala Chandler. She's on the board of Madre and Sister. Madre does work in Central America. Sister is an organization that works to support women and children of South Africa. She's a mother and a grandmother. She's an artist. She's a former dean and a writer, a former board member of WBAI, former faculty member of African Studies at Brooklyn College, and fortunately and luckily, she and I had an opportunity to co-author an article together. So hopefully tonight we'll have a lot for you to think about and for you to comment on. The format is that each person will speak for a short period of time. And I know you may want to hear them speak for a longer period of time, but we made the conscious decision to allow you time to ask questions and have some direct interaction. Professor Phoenix.
Although the theme tonight is racial tensions in New York City, today is Black Solidarity. And I would like to speak to racism in the context of Black Solidarity. The concept of Black Solidarity is not new. Despite the attempts of Europeans to identify blackness as all that is evil, there have been several movements towards Black Solidarity. Most notably, that of Marcus Garvey, the Black African movement, which gave us the red, black, and green, and the Pan-African movement of Dr. Du Bois. The setting aside of the specific day to acknowledge and celebrate our blackness was conceived in or about 1969 here in New York City by Carlos Russell and a group of other black intellectuals. It's based partially on the theme of the Negro Ensemble Company's play, A Day of Absence. The holiday was meant to symbolize the power inherent in a united black community. It was also a community response to the racism which then is now threatening to destroy our community. Black Solidarity Day is a testament to the fact that we have inherited God-given ability to be the greatest people on the face of the earth. The excellence of black contributions to every group, despite the weight of hundreds of years of vicious racism, is a testament to that ability. We are a can-do people. We have the ability. Black Solidarity speaks to the need to develop the group will to realize the fullest potential of this God-given power. The most vile racism is that which furthers the belief that black progress depends on the actions of white people. Black Solidarity Day is meant to be an affirmation of the fact that black people can prosper if we break the mental chains of servitude solidarity can give us the will to use it. How can the black community most effectively counteract the racism of white America? We must unite. Unite to stop the counterproductive intra-community divisiveness that pits Caribbean black against American black, light-skinned black against dark-skinned black, middle-class black against poor black, Christian black against Muslim black. Our energies must be devoted to group development. Those who lead us must develop a philosophy and a pragmatic plan to achieve economic freedom, regardless of what race. Unite to stop the victimization of blacks by the prejudice that stalk our community. We must stop our children from raping and robbing our grandmothers. We must establish and enforce a code of conduct in our community that will allow blacks to prosper, to live without the constant threat of violence. We must do this because the police have neither the desire nor the means to protect us from each other. And they surely don't want to protect us from white people. The pretense of equal justice is a racist joke. If we do not do it, it will not be done. We must unite to establish a program that will build and maintain affordable, decent, low-density housing in the community without recourse to government. The resources of the Black church and other community institutions must be harnessed to guide the economic development of the community for the benefit of the community. We must unite to develop our own resources rather than expend energy on futile demands for reparations, which white America has no intention to pay. Yes, they owe us, but we cannot allow our survival to depend on their willingness to pay. If we are not economically or politically strong enough to take reparations, then we must develop alternate strategies for survival. We must develop an economic infrastructure that will allow us to provide our youth with access to the good life. History demonstrates that we cannot depend on white America to provide us solutions to the problems that it created. We must unite to develop an educational alternative to the public school system for the education of our children, an alternative that will allow us to celebrate the richness of our common African heritage, an alternative that will allow us to salute the heroes and heroines of the black diaspora who have struggled in the face of overwhelming odds to maintain the integrity of their heritage. Yes, we have a right to be angry. The assaults on black communities around the world, viciously perpetrated by those who would impede our ability to see that our salvation lies in embracing an ethos of self-love and self-reliance, justify that. But the energy diverted to hating whites could be better utilized in developing a community that does not depend upon the whims of whites. Better utilized in channeling the $50 billion a year handled by the black community into the economic development of the black community. The essence of Black Solidarity Day is its affirmation of the power inherent in a unified black community. It is a testament to the principle that self-love, self-affirmation, and self-directed development are the most effective weapons against racism. The racist underpinnings of Western society have been so firmly established that it is easy to be anti-white, but it is not necessarily productive. The real challenge to the black community is to develop the will to coalesce around and affirm our belief in the value and beauty of our African heritage. Self-affirmation is a potent therapy. We must believe that we can prosper without the aid of white America. We are direct descendants of a people who created writing, who created mathematics, who created science and art, a people who common ground emanating from our common heritage that will allow us to move into the 21st century, secure in the beauty of our blackness, proud of the greatness of our common heritage, and determined to be the masters of our collective destiny, even if some white folks don't like us. Thank you.
Black Solidarity Day was began here in New York. In fact, here in Brooklyn. 20 years ago, Medgar College was began too. So it's kind of double anniversary. And for those of us who work here, we know the real need of having solidarity behind something trying to deal with the question of self-determination. Because that's why many of us are here, to deal with the question of empowerment, black men, women, and children. At the same time, when we start looking at the particularity of what we have to confront, at the same time we're trying to move forward, we also have to defend ourselves. And there are those who do it quite ably, and do it more than ably. Automatics.
Kelly, members of the dais, brothers and sisters. This is my first opportunity to be in this building, but I'm not a stranger to Medgar College. I go back some 15 or 16 years, and I can remember driving from Manhattan over to Medgar on Saturday mornings to teach our future leaders at that time. And as I look back on that experience, I can say that even if it was not rewarding to the students, and I hope it was rewarding to me, because I learned so much, had an opportunity to analyze many of our problems, and certainly Medgar served as a launching pad to my future in the law. So I'm very pleased to be back here tonight with you. Very pleased to know that the struggle at Medgar College continues. The question might be asked tonight, is racial tensions good or bad? And I suppose there are those who may argue that racial tensions are bad. I would argue, however, that under the circumstances of which we find ourselves in America, racial tensions are good. Let me explain what I mean. As long as we have not been given our 40 acres and a mule, that's right, the struggle must continue. That's right. A lot of times, we do not analyze the problem from a broad perspective. Most of the time, we analyze the problem from a personal perspective. You know, if my child was not lynched, I'm not affected. You know, regardless of what happens to Michael Griffith, regardless of what happens to Michael Stewart, it wasn't my child. And sometimes with that kind of limited thinking, we come up with very narrow results. Now, a lot of people, when I said racial tensions, good or bad, and I said that they were good, had a problem with that, because that was a broad perspective. But let me give it to you on a narrow perspective, on a personal perspective. Let's assume that I walked out and took someone's pocketbook, snatched it away from me, and then turned around and said, let us be friends. Right, that's on a personal level. Some of us cannot understand it on a broad level, but on a personal level, we understand that. We understand the idea of someone snatching your wallet, snatching your pocketbook, and then telling you it's all right. Let us live in peace together. And they got your pocketbook, and they got your wallet. And then when you make a move to get your pocketbook back, then they say, well, you are the antagonist. You are the problem. You are the racist. You understand? And a lot of us go for that. A lot of us buy that because we cannot deal beyond our own personal light. If it does not affect us personally, it doesn't mean anything. There are a lot of people who say, well, Alton Maddox, Al Sharpton are racist. Then there are a lot of us that, well, that's a bad word. If they are, I can't deal with them. Don't necessarily know who we are. Haven't necessarily heard what we had to say.
That's right.
But just because they read it in the general press, just because white do not like us. You know, many of us assume the posture of our masters. But when you look at the notion of black solidarity, then what is so different than what people espouse on this day and what we practice on a daily basis? When you look at the movement that has been in effect in New York, it has been a black movement. White liberals are not allowed. It's not a coalition movement. It's a black movement. It's a black movement because black people are affected. Nobody else understands our Why are you going to join up with people who have interests that are different than yours? When you solidify, when we talk about black solidarity and why we should come together as a people, is because none of us are liberated. That's our interest, is liberation. That is why we can revolve around that. Because I don't care who you are and where you come from. When you come to America, you fit within the scope of Dred Scott.
That's right. That's right.
No Negro has any right that a white man is bound to respect. And you see that on a daily basis.
That's right.
No Negro has any right that a white man is bound to respect. Let us look at this black movement. Not this coalition movement, but this black movement. I remember when I came to New York, and I joined this legal services program. It was all white in Harlem. And I said, this is wrong. This is wrong. Nobody would allow this. And I said, this office has to be all black. And a lot of people, I got problems with that. I said, well, I don't. A lot of Negroes fought that. I didn't know New York. I didn't know anybody in New York. I had just gotten off the boat. Didn't know a soul in this city when I came here. Didn't know anybody. Didn't have anybody to call. Not a soul. The reason why we were able to get over to Medgar was because a professor lived in the same building that we lived in. He said, you know, you should teach at Medgar. It was some 15, 16 years ago. One of the first person I ever met in New York, and that's why I got to Medgar. But the point is that after about 8 months in that legal services program, I began to go beyond Harlem because there were legal services programs all over the city. And there was a legal services program out here in Brooklyn. I didn't know anything about Brooklyn. I hardly knew anything about Manhattan. Hardly knew anything about Queens or any other places. But I was told just by accident that this office has all Jewish lawyers. I said, what? You mean y'all been fighting me? And nobody told me that in other communities, by law, nobody could practice law in those communities but them? And people said, well, you know, we don't really understand the Jewish culture. Well, then I said, well, why do you understand the African culture? You don't understand, we don't understand the Jewish culture, then what makes you authorities on our culture?
That's right.
What makes us authorities on the Irish culture or the Italian culture? I say that because a great movement has come afoot in New York. Black people on the move.
Yes.
In New York. Don't let nobody fool you. They've been inspired by a black movement. Now there are some Negroes who are trying to dilute that movement.
Yes.
Right? Let us be very clear about this. There are some Negroes who are trying to dilute that movement.
Yes.
Just like you got black coffee and you add some milk.
Yes.
That's why you hear everybody start talking about coalition politics. But as you notice, and as you will notice in the next few days, I'm not saying nothing. I'm going to let you see for yourself who's going to control this city in 1990.
That's right.
1991. In 1992. In 1993. I'm not going to say nothing because nobody's going to accuse me. I'm just going to sit back and watch. I'm already taking notes. Taking great notes as we're going to be in control of this city. But let's talk about the black movement for 1 minute. Professor Kelly gave us an injunction. He doesn't know what Reverend Sharp now. We just talk for hours. We can't do that here. All right? So we just love to talk. We just play the theater. People who come over there know that we may not get out 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. But right here, we're going to honor. We're going to honor this. But just let me say 2 or 3 things with both thoughts. The black movement, in terms of its achievements, I can remember in 1983, black men and women convened the congressional police brutality hearings right here in New York City. Wasn't a coalition, black people. Concerned about a problem that affected our community. And as a result of that, racial tensions forced Koch to name the first Negro commissioner in the history of New York. We hoped that he was a black guy, These things got to evolve. The first time we put somebody in office, it's usually going to be a Negro. We just have to evolve. All right? So every time somebody's in a new office, we know it probably will be a Negro. I'm not saying in all instances, but in many.
Yeah.
But it has to evolve. People have to get used to us. And sometimes maybe the Negro is better first. Maybe they can deal with that better. But it was the racial tension that forced Ed Koch to appoint Ben Ward. 1988, Richard Mentor. Racial tension. I remember back in 83 when we tried to get Mentor. We created tension. People went to jail. With racial tension, black solidarity, that eventually brought about the first school chancellor in the history of New York City. People's Howard Beach, Michael Griffith, the first special prosecutor ever appointed to deal with racial crime. New York had to admit that the regular DAs in this state could not deal with racial crime for the first time in the history. A special prosecutor was appointed. After more than 10,000 black men and women and children marched down Fifth Avenue,
Yeah.
Right.
scared white people to death.
Right.
Black solidarity. Somebody asked me tonight about Brawley. Maybe in the question and answer session we may deal with that. But people say, well, what was some of the benefits of Brawley? It wasn't like Howard Beach, but it was. Because if any of you recognize, we went on national TV and condemned the criminal justice system in New York.
Right.
And one of the things we said that there were 62 counties in this state, and each county had a white DA, and said that Mario Cuomo was the architect of racism. Here's a man who was aspiring to be president.
Right.
He turned around and appointed Robert Johnson, the first black DA in New York State, in the Bronx. It was the black solidarity movement that brought that about. Tomorrow, David Dinkins might be elected mayor of the city of New York. But we paid a heavy price for David Dinkins. Don't think that David's election was in a vacuum, because many of us were in the trenches. And the one thing that white people even said we got to get around David on was because we got to heal the racists. But in order to heal, there had to be somebody out there in the trenches. We paid our price. We hope that David will not burn the bridge that allowed him to get from point A to point B. People can talk all of this. But if Bensonhurst had not happened,
Right.
David may have not been the Democratic nominee. Not just the fact that Yusef Hawkins was shot down like an animal in Bensonhurst, but the response of the community in Bensonhurst, black solidarity, paved the way for David Dinkins. And just on a personal note, because Professor Phoenix mentioned this, and I believe this, by how we as a people have to come together. And when we do, all things are possible. I tell people all the time, if 2 million Africans march down Fifth Avenue one day, it'll be all over. 2 million Africans walking down Fifth Avenue, it'll be all over in this town. If these people are as frightened as they are Al Sharpton and I, then what would they do to 2 million Africans? Just a final note. I remember 4 or 5 years ago, I was charged with various crimes over in Manhattan as a result of my involvement in the Michael Stewart case. I was framed, and there was a white judge who testified against me and others. And then some people said, well, you know, Maddox, you're in trouble now. If you get convicted, you're going to be disbarred. Maybe you ought to get some white lawyers. And I said to them, I said, well, maybe those white lawyers may be good for a lot of people, but they're not good for me. I say that because I told my people then, some of them are in the audience tonight, that my future lied in their hands, the hands of black people. And black people had the courage and the strength and the power to carry me through. That was 1984. We went to trial for a month, and the jury came back after listening to the judge and others. My only witness was Willie Boston, convicted felon. They had all of the pillars of the community testifying against me. But I had my people on my side. And the jury came back. That's the power got to believe in it. I say that because I think the message that David must have tomorrow, that David, we can see you through. You don't need to go anywhere else. The power is here. Thank you very much.
I'd like to recognize Fred Myers, President of the government, and also well, I guess question has been stated about any misunderstanding that the only issue we're discussing tonight is a question of black liberation. Goes back to not Dred Scott, but before Dred Scott. Because before Chief Justice Taney said a black man had no rights, which a white man was bound to respect, black people had no rights, which white people were bound to respect. And so eliminating that heritage, that racist heritage, is the bottom line of liberation. I also like to recognize Viola Maddox, who's on our faculty. And for those of you who say you can't find any books on African American people or African people in diaspora on the continent, then obviously you haven't spoken to them. When we talk about black, I'm always reminded of two things that Malcolm X said. One was that when he used the term black, he meant something broader than just those people who were enslaved here and called black. He meant people of color. I'm also reminded that maybe a month before he died, in the interview on radio here, he indicated that the struggle, the final struggle, would not be based on color, but would be based on those people who stood for right and those who wanted to continue all the forms of oppression. So when we talk about defining racism, as Attorney Maddox has said, we do have to say, who is the racist? Not who says they are not racist, but indeed, who is the racist? In defining a movement, a black movement, who speaks for that movement? In talking about coalition politics, we have to raise the question, does coalition politics remain impossibly racist as long as black people are not in charge and dominating that coalition? And then we have to always remember what Dr. King said in terms of approaching things with intelligence. That intelligence is a combination of having a tough mind and a tender heart. So at the same time, we have to, without hesitation, be perfectly clear who is and is not a part of our struggle. We also have to have the heart to relate to all human beings as human. Our next speaker, as a minister, has a responsibility to both speak truth and to provide the spiritual and material uplift of his flock. Reverend Charles.
Black Solidarity Day. I think one of the keys to solidarity is to support each other. And we, Brother Maddox and I, in support of this program tonight brought many members of the United African Movement with us. I'd like them to stand. I'd like to say to Professor Chandler, Professor Phoenix, one of the ways of getting a standing ovation is to have your crowd with you. Certainly, as we meet tonight on Black Solidarity Day, and we talk about racial tension, we must remember that the man that this school is named after, Medgar and Martin Luther King, used to advocate creative tension. Tension is not always a negative. If you get in an argument with your wife, you're tense. And if you buy her a gift, you might be tense all the way home and presenting it. One is negative, the other is positive. It's a question of how you use tension. Too often, calming tension has become a code word for cowardice. So rather than say you don't like to cause tension, just say you're scared. And those of us that are willing to confront the issues, let us confront them. We live in a city that it is normal for abuses to be perpetrated on our people and nobody pays for it. And we must keep it tense until we are equally protected under the law or implement our own law.
Right.
If we had taken a stand and brought the thermometer as tense as it could go on the elevator bumpers, Michael Stewart may not have happened. If we had done it with Michael Stewart, Michael Griffith may not have happened.
That's right.
If we had done it with Michael Griffith, maybe Yusuf Hawkins would be here tonight rather than we remembering him tonight. How long are we going to let the murderers and rapists of black people tell us how to keep the thermometer? And then if we're going to really deal with solidarity, we got to be consistent with solidarity. Solidarity does not mean call unity when you out front and throw stones when others out front. The same papers that condemned Maddox and I last year are now condemning David Dinkins. And some of y'all that believed it on them, believe it on him. It's the same papers and the same crackers for the same reasons. And we believe our enemy and let them choose for us what is best for us. I've never seen a football game where you ask the opposition who ought to be the quarterback, unless you intend to lose the game. So why should we let white folks choose who's going to lead black folks, when it is the fact that white folks treat us like they do, that we need the leadership that we have? It is an insult to me that despite our differences, we can accept our slave masters and can't accept each other. Despite our differences, we can find more reasons to stay apart from each other and have coalitions with others. I don't understand people that can have coalitions with white faggots and bull daddies, but can't talk to me because they don't like my hairstyle. With people that are diametrically opposed to you, but can't have conversation with people that are trying to be liberated just like you are. We must, if we're going to talk about solidarity, be serious about solidarity. Yeah, we got differences among the leadership, but I believe G2 Wausi is much more right in the Dinkins campaign than Robert Abrams. got to not depend on whites to be free. We got to tell them they want to deal with us. What is the guidelines of dealing with us? I just left Brooklyn College and told them, if y'all want us to come together, well, the city to come together for what? What are we going to do when we get together? Unless we got an understanding of why we're coming together, you might not want to come together with me. Because it might be the biggest riot in the world if all of us come together and haven't discussed what we're going to do together. If come together means that we vote for you and vote in coalition, but nothing else changes, that's not coming together.
That's right.
We, 20 years after Solidarity Day started, are on the verge of a black man, but we are still economically retarded. Look at our community. Everybody does business in our community but us. So you can't have a lopsided agenda where you can be progressive politically and degressive economically, because then your politicians have to work for the economic laws of your opposition. Everybody in our community is making money off of black folks but black folks. We fried chicken since we got here. But Colonel Saunders, a Kentucky Colonel Cracker, comes in and sells it to us. We've been eating watermelon since we got here. But Koreans come in and slice it up and put it in a plastic bucket and sell it to us for $1. Arabs sell us the newspapers and can't even read what they sell us. They don't care if you want the daily news of the city sun as long as you buy it from them. We need to take economic control while we take political control. We need to go en masse to white businesses. And as we walk in, they say, "Can I help you?" Tell them, "Yes." Because unless we get economic control, our political control is standing on quicksand. And those that are our enemy will control our livelihood. Lastly, as we talk about solidarity and racial tensions, the disparity is not just among the grassroots, but it's at every level. Anytime we live in a nation that Jean-Jacques Abor can slap a cop and get 3 days, and James Brown can run from the cops and get 6 years. It ain't got nothing to do with whether you're rich black or poor black. If you're black, you have a problem with justice. So we must strive to have principle over everything else. We must not allow people to play on our divisions. Every black that they have a question about, whether I have a difference with them or not, I'm from G2, Sonny, all of them. They can run out of our own campaign, where Dinkins is running on the basis of sacrifices by men like G2. Yet no one raises the question on what is Bob Abrams still doing in the campaign? And what is these crackers that run the correction guards?
Endorsing him.
What is he doing still in the campaign? If you want to talk about offense, there's a whole lot of crackers that offend me.
Yeah.
And offend you.
Yeah.
That is still there. So we must not let our differences have us so that we don't have a principle. Tonight, as we meet across the diaspora, everybody is fighting on a principle. We're the only people in the diaspora that is willing to fight for a compromise. Nelson Mandela is sitting in jail tonight because of a principle. He could sign a letter and agree not to say something and come out and say it was strategic, but because he had a principle, he said, "I refuse to bend my principles even to hope." So how can you wear a free Mandela button and then go to the village and sell out everything you believe in the name of coalition? Take your Mandela button off What they mean by coalition is you give up everything.
That's right.
First, give up firearms. When we see you go for that, give up Sharpton and Maddox. When you go for that, we move closer. Give up Waus. When you go for that, give up Jesse. By the morning, give up your wife and children. Because they know you in the giving up business. So why not just give up everything? We must not be put in a trick by ourselves. I'm not condemning anybody. I hope anybody's better than Giuliani. This cracker trying to put me in jail on blank tape, so you know I don't. But I'm saying that solidarity is more than balling up our fists and yelling, no justice, no peace.
Yeah.
It is to really live by the principles that we expound. And then we must be honest to our children. We said no peace until there's justice. So that means exactly that. Not no peace until some Negroes get in office.
Okay.
Not no peace until they name the block after us.
All right. Whoa. Yay! Look at that. Put the lights back on.
Somebody, you see?
We used to the dog, it don't matter. Not no peace until we accommodate. But no peace until there is justice. And if we fight and live by that principle, then we can win. And we should not make those of us that are willing to pay the ultimate prices, that will face the racist and face the mobsters of our day, and help our enemy identify them as the problem. We must know that our problem is not each other. We may have some discomfort, but we're not each other's problem. We may have some disagreements, but we're not each other's problem. Our problem is a united problem. Some of you sit like you arrived here on the Mayflower with a reservation and a first-class seat. You didn't come here like that. We came here as slaves, and they did not ask us what our philosophy was or what our ideology was. They saw we were black, and they put us down together, therefore we got to rise together.
That's right.
We can't get caught up in white folks' arguments. One of us got an Adam Smith book and believe in capitalism. Another got a Marx book and believe in Marxism. Both of them was two European crackers that didn't understand what African people was all about. So I'm not going to argue two dead men's philosophy when we are living Africans that neither philosophy has helped to liberate. We must stand on our own. No one will free us but us. No one will help us but us. No one can advance us but ourselves. And some of us are not going to be no compromises. Some of us are not going to play boy. Some of us are not going to play girl. Some of us would rather die on our feet than keep living on our feet.
It's always amazing how some people can stand up and talk for 2 minutes and talk for 2 hours and it doesn't make a difference in terms of people knowing they heard something when it's finished. Living Africans that need a philosophy, as I believe how you put it. That and the question of black liberation, again, summarizes where we are. You can't give up everything to be a part of a coalition. You can't, and that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, I always noticed how I used to do South African organizing around, not South African organizing, but organizing around Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and Angola. And I always remember that it would be easier to get people to come out and demonstrate around issues in Africa than to come out and to demonstrate around issues in New York City.
So true.
So we do have to think about what we have to do and about people who won't compromise because as real. In terms of, we do accept slave masters. I'm saying we, because I'm talking about all of us, and I'm not pointing any fingers. We do accept slave masters, but we don't accept our own.
That's right.
We have to think about that because it's a very real point. We do have to be serious about solidarity. We do have to recognize that political empowerment means nothing without economic empowerment, and that it's like standing on quicksand. Because when you stand on quicksand, you sink to the bottom. I always thought what was so interesting about Spike Lee's last film is why would you worry about boycotting a restaurant when you could have your own restaurant? An option never raised in that picture. We do have to strive to have principle above all else, because we are more than just reactions to hostility and negative principles. We do have to remember who is one of us. I know I also used to be part of an anti-Klan organizing group in New York City, New York State, that got the anti-Klan curriculum changed statewide. I got it introduced into the public schools. And gay black men and women were very much a part of that. Gay black men and women were involved in marching in Washington. And indeed, the first march in Washington was the principal organizer was a gay man, the gay black man. So we do have to be sure that when we talk about who stands with us, who we are. We also have to look at the question of tension versus cowardice in terms of confronting issues. Now, I always remember wondering if Zola Chandler was going to use the axe handle to bust Jimmy Carter across his head when he was running for president. Zola Chandler?
An officer of Malcolm's Organization of Afro-American Unity wrapped up his introductory speech. And now, brothers and sisters, I present a man who would give his life for you. The applause was thunderous. Malcolm walked slowly to the rostrum. His face was strained, tired, and his step lacked its usual spring. He held up his right hand. Assalamu alaikum, he said in a hoarse voice. Peace be unto you. Wa alaikum assalam. Some 200 voices responded in unison. And unto you, peace. The tense silence awaiting Malcolm's opening words was suddenly shattered by a scuffle in the audience. Get your hands off my pocket, man, someone shouted. Malcolm stepped out from behind the podium and walked to the front of the stage. Now, brothers, break it up, he said in a weary voice. In the back of the ballroom, there was a soft crump. As a small incendiary device was triggered, smoke spiraled into the air, and a woman screamed. In the fourth row, on the left-hand side of the ballroom, a man stood up with a sawed-off 12-gauge J.C. Higgins shotgun. There was a muffled roar as he fired both barrels into Malcolm's chest. Simultaneously, two men in the first row jumped up, one with a lugger in his hand, the other with a .45 automatic. They just stood up in front of me, coolly took aim and shot, just like a firing squad, a woman eyewitness in the third row reported. Malcolm stood erect for a few seconds under the hail of bullets and then crumpled to the floor. He just seemed to melt into the stage, another eyewitness, Mrs. Patricia Russell, a psychiatric social worker from New Rochelle, later recounted. It seemed to me to take minutes, like a slow-motion film. As Malcolm lay on the stage, the gunmen in the first row emptied their weapons into his prone body. In the audience, pandemonium broke loose. Women threw themselves on top of their children. Men fell to the floor or scrambled to cover under the literature table. Malcolm's wife, Betty, attending the meeting with the couple's 4 children, ran toward the stage screaming hysterically, "They're killing my husband. They're killing my husband." One of Malcolm's aides rushed to a phone in the lobby and called Columbia Presbyterian Hospital for an ambulance. The hospital was directly across the street from the ballroom, but 15 minutes later, no ambulance had arrived. Several of Malcolm's guards ran out on foot and brought a stretcher back to the stage. Surrounded by sobbing men and women, they carried Malcolm across the street to the hospital. He was taken to the emergency operating room where a team of doctors cut through his chest to massage his heart. It was too late. Malcolm had 21 bullet wounds in his body. His heart was pulsed by 7 gunshot slugs from the initial blast. The aorta was destroyed. Both lungs were punctured, and his spine was shattered. At 3:45 in the afternoon, a hospital spokesman addressed the knots of milling black people keeping vigil on the sidewalk. The person you know as Malcolm X is dead. February 21st, 1965. This is November 6th, 1989. And I suggest to you, brothers and sisters, tonight in this auditorium, that we do not have to recreate the wheel. Malcolm X came, he lived, and he died so that we would not have to recreate the wheel. Racism, what is it? Something as American as apple pie. Racism, what is it? It began in this country in 1492 when Christopher Columbus, quote unquote, discovered America. That would be like me coming into your house and discovering your television, or discovering your refrigerator, or Sitting Bull discovering London, the beginnings of racism. The reason I want to deal with the question of what is racism is because we often hear about us being racist in reverse. I suggest to you we cannot be racist in reverse. Racism is not a question of my dislike of white people or white people's dislike of me. We can dislike each other forever. Racism is about power. Power to determine a people's future. According to the definition provided by the Council on Interracial Books for Children, so you don't run out of here and say, this is what Zala Chandler said. This is something that's documented in the library. Racism is an attitude, action, or institutional structure which subordinates a person or group because of their color. In the United States today, only white people can be racist since they control the institutions which have the power to oppress people. The fact that racism is such that the very people who dare to stand up and fight against racism then get called troublemakers, terrorists, communists, liars, dividers, and all of the other adjectives that people like Ronald Reagan and then Bush and of course the CIA come up with to determine and define for us instead of redefining for ourselves. Just to remind us a little bit, in 1954, the Supreme Court decided that separate was not equal in the United States. And when black folks thought that meant, well, I guess we could go ahead and make some changes right now, we began to start making some changes. What was the response? White America came out brutalizing and killing all the nonviolent people who tried to put in place what the Supreme Court says should be in place. They used chains and they used clubs against tiny black children who dared to attend school to receive a quality education. Today, when we demonstrate in their communities, like in Howard Beach, like in Bensonhurst, the community's response that we demonstrate in, instead of standing up saying, you're right, and the killing of Yusef Hawkins was wrong, you're right, the killing of Michael Stewart was wrong, you're right, the killing of Griffith was wrong, instead of them standing up and saying it was wrong, what do? They stand up and throw things at us that tell us that we are wrong, but stand up and say that they are wrong. Malcolm because anything south of the Canadian border is the South in the United States. New York City is Mississippi, it's Alabama, it's Georgia. But I was born in Alabama, and I have family there, and one of the big differences between Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia is that black folks have guns, and they know how to shoot those guns. You see, we have a lot of guns floating around in our community right now, but very often the person that's supposed to get shot doesn't get shot because the person that's doing the shooting has never taken time to learn how to shoot and make sure that they are accurate. We have a lot of tough guys in our community, and I want to know when they killed our grandmother, Eleanor Bumpers, when they killed our grandmother, Eleanor Bumpers, where were all the tough guys that killed my brother and my sister? Racism, I can't be a reverse racist, no matter what my attitude is. Racism is turning on the television and seeing yourself only as a comedian, or seeing yourself only as a maid or a janitor, or worse, not seeing yourself at all, flipping through every single channel and not seeing yourself at all. Racism is looking into a textbook, whether it's in Medgar or in the high schools or in the elementary schools, and not learning that you discovered mathematics, not knowing that you discovered medicine, not knowing that you built the pyramid, not knowing that you invented the clock, not knowing that you invented the stoplight, not knowing that you invented the gas mask, not knowing that you invented shoes, not knowing that you invented sugar, not knowing that you invented potato chips, not knowing that you invented a turnip in the kitchen, and I could go on and on and go. That is racism. Racism is being 22% of the population, or so they tell us. I've never had a census take a knock on my door yet. But anyway, telling us that we're 22% of the population, but we make less than 1% of the business finances in this country, and we make up, in many cases, 80% of the jails in this country.
Yes,
right. Racism is being 22% of the population and learning that a black child's father is 70% more likely than a white child's father to be unemployed, 70% more likely. And that same black child's mother has even greater chances than those 70% to be unemployed. We are, of course, victims of this. Racism is being a teenager in New York and realizing that you may never hold a decent job. That's what the future holds for you, Mickey D. Racism is knowing that all the people killed by the police, over 45% of them are black, and in cities like Chicago and Philadelphia, over 70% of them are black. Racism is knowing that in the history, and please listen to this one, in the history, the entire history of the United States of America, no white person has ever been sentenced to death for killing a black person. No white person has ever been sentenced to death for killing a white person. And this is in spite of the fact, because you see, the television would have us think that we are the criminals in the society, just like it would have us believe that we are the welfare people in the society, when the majority of people in this country on welfare are indeed white people. But racism would have us believe that, we're the only ones that commit crimes. And the reality is that more white people are arrested for killing black people than black people are arrested for killing white folks, but never has any one of them been executed. So if any of you dare to speak and say, I believe we should reinstate the death penalty, you better think about that.
That's
because
right.
we don't live in a system. Racism is knowing that the average sentence for juvenile delinquency is 2 years. A white juvenile delinquent is 2 years and 6 weeks, and 5 years and 7 months for a black young person. 2 years versus 5 years. And of course, this list can go on. Discrimination in housing, health, according to FBI statistics, not Dollar Channel statistics, the chances of a black male child reaching the age of 25 in the United States is 3 out of 5. So that means when I look at my 2 sons, I got to hope and pray and of course fight that they live to be age 25 years old from the moment that they are born. And that a black woman will die in childbirth at a rate almost 4 times that of a white woman. black women lack prenatal care at a rate of 2 times those of white women. So when they start to tell us about reverse racism, let's deal with some of the real facts in terms of what is racism and who can be a racist and who cannot be a racist in the society. What can we do about it? And that's my last moment. Define ourselves. We got to define ourselves.
Yeah.
We got to know who we are. We got to know where we come from. And we got to be proud of it. And we are not allowed, should not allow any teacher, I don't care how many doctorates they got in front of their name, and I don't care how many masters they got behind their name, any teacher to define for us who we are. We built the pyramid. We built. Second, brothers and sisters, we got to learn how to defend ourselves.
Right.
Defense, self-defense is a right of a people. And we got to be able to defend ourselves, as Malcolm said, by any means necessary. By any means necessary. Self-defense is our right, not our privilege. That means from the youngest child to the oldest adult. And I do believe that when, you know, there's a saying in the Bible, an eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. I talk about 10 eyes for 1 tooth. You understand what I'm saying? And when that starts to happen, I do believe that some things will be changed in the city. When we start to realize that the response when they kill our grandmothers and when they kill our children cannot just be, what a shame. Pass the keys, please. We have to realize that the response has got to be a little bit better than that. And when we dare to wander in some communities that perhaps we shouldn't wander into, if we're prepared to make sure that we don't just have people falling on our side, then perhaps they will realize that, oh, let me hesitate before I jump on this one. Let me hesitate, because they might be prepared to ensure that somebody will fall on their side. And finally, and I think every speaker here has talked about that, we have to be about developing our community, developing for our children. What is the legacy that we will leave to them? We have people who have walked this earth, and I don't understand, because there's no other people on this earth who have lost who we have lost. Whether I talk about Patrice Lumumba, whether I talk about Maurice Bush Bishop, whether I talk about Malcolm X, whether I talk about Bob Marley, whether I talk about Fannie Lou Hamer, whether I talk about Emmett Till, I mean, and go on and on and on. We have lost people that we should not have lost. And the genius that existed in those folks that we have lost must be gathered up so that we do not recreate the wheel. And in the words of my sister Asada, we must fight for our freedom. We have nothing to lose but our change. Thank you.
say that before Tawana left, you want me to talk in this? Let me say that when we were engaged in the struggle with Tawana, and we still are, it has not died. What has happened is that the tables have turned.
Right.
And when the tables turn, the press does not want to comment on it. Pagonis did what we wanted him to do, and that was he sued us. And since that time, the press has refused to let us know that over 60% of his lawsuit has already been dismissed. That he has gone into court to stop us from taking his deposition. And that all is not well as far as Stephen Pagonis is concerned. And I think Reverend Sharpton touched on this a few minutes ago when he said that what they are doing today, they did to us. And they did not have to wait until they did it to him to understand that. Because we have to get beyond the personal perspective. Tawana is at Howard University. And I somewhat pleased with that because I attended Howard at a time when Professor Chandler also attended Howard University. And she has been blessed with a new name by Minister Louis Farrakhan, Miriam Muhammad. She is doing very well. We in New York have continued to support her. Every month, the United African Movement provides for her college education. We have committed ourselves to enabling Tawana to be able to go to college without any concerns about finances, because we intend to do that right here in New York. And just let me say this, Reverend Sharpton asked many members of the United African Movement to stand, and I want to say that we are so blessed to have so many people who have been so supportive of us, because the bottom line is that you can never be any stronger than your community. And there are people here who are committed to change. You can't make change in your homes. You can't make change on the dance floor. You have to get out into the streets. That is what people are very concerned about. And that's what Professor Chandler talked about, what is always going to be our response. We had not gone to Bensonhurst. Things may have been different today, even in terms of the mayoral campaign. If Reverend Sharpton had not gone to Howard Beach, things may have been different there. There's a lot of commitment that we have to give in order that we may be able to achieve. But Tawana is doing very well, and we hope that soon she will be back in New York. White folks don't like to hear that,